Adrian, don't even think about showing up. My brother Callum's voice cut through the phone like ice. You'll just ruin the photos. The line went dead before I could say a single word. I stared at my phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry wasp. He thought one phone call could erase me from his perfect day. He thought he was cutting me out, but he had no idea who I had become. My name is Adrian Vance, and I'm 30 years old. For my entire life, I've been the family disappointment, the brother who couldn't get his act together. Callum was everything I wasn't. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect fiancé with a trust fund bigger than most people's houses. While he climbed corporate ladders, I was the one who couldn't find his way. The son who bounced between jobs before disappearing for what my parents called some security work. They loved talking about Callum's success at dinner parties. You could hear the pride dripping from their voices when they mentioned his promotion to senior partner. But when someone asked about me, they'd just sigh. Oh, Adrian is still figuring things out. That was their polite way of saying I was a mess. They saw me as directionless, unfocused, and embarrassing. What they didn't know was that while they looked down on me, I was building something they could never understand. The official family judgment came 2 months before the wedding. It was a digital execution, and I was the only one in the crosshairs. Callum's face filled my laptop screen, our parents sitting behind him like silent jury members. His smile never reached his eyes as he started his rehearsed speech. Adrian, we need to discuss the guest list, he began, his tone artificially sweet. We're creating a specific aesthetic for the wedding. A certain look for photos and videos. My throat tightened. I knew exactly where this was heading, but I let him continue his performance. Honestly, he said, fake sympathy coding every word. You just don't fit. You don't have a respectable date. Your style is, well, you know. He waved his hand dismissively. We can't have you in the family photos looking out of place. It would be awkward for everyone, especially you. I looked past him to Dad, silently begging him to say something, anything, to defend me. He studied his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Mom offered her tight, practiced smile. It's Callum's special day, honey. Let's not make waves. My own parents had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. On the call were my aunt and 2 cousins, their faces frozen in uncomfortable squares on my screen. They heard every humiliating word. The pity in their eyes burned worse than the rejection itself. The final insult arrived a week later in my mailbox. A plain white envelope with my name scrawled across the front. Inside wasn't a wedding invitation. It was a cheap sympathy card from the drugstore, the kind with generic flowers and empty words. There was no heartfelt letter inside, no apology for their cruelty. There was just a check for $200. Callum's handwritten note was tucked behind it. For your trouble. Sorry you can't make it. It wasn't kindness. It was a payoff. Blood money to keep me quiet and away. He was telling me that my silence, my absence from his perfect day, was worth exactly $200. It was the final confirmation that to my family, I was nothing but an inconvenience to be bought off. I stared at that check for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. They thought they had broken me. They thought I would cash their guilt money and disappear quietly into the background of their carefully curated lives. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated me completely. I tore the check into tiny pieces and watched them flutter into the trash like confetti. They could keep their money. I had something worth infinitely more than what they offered, something they couldn't buy or fake or inherit. I had earned my place in this world through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. A month later, the first wave of social media posts began. Callum's engagement party was held at some fancy rooftop restaurant downtown. I scrolled through the photos, seeing my entire family clustered together, raising champagne glasses around a beaming Callum and his fiancée. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, old family friends. Everyone except me. Mom posted a photo of just her and Callum with a gushing caption. So proud of my amazing son and the incredible man he's become. It felt like a deliberate slap, a public declaration that she only had one son worth celebrating. The post got dozens of likes and comments praising Callum's success. Then I saw it. A distant family friend had commented, "Beautiful photos. Where's Adrian?" I held my breath, waiting to see what lie they would spin. Callum himself replied with casual dismissiveness. "Oh, he's swamped with work. Couldn't get away. We miss him, though." The fake sentiment was worse than being ignored. They weren't just excluding me from their perfect pictures. They were actively rewriting history, creating a sanitized family story where I was just the busy, absent brother they supposedly missed. A convenient fiction to explain my absence without admitting their cruelty. I closed the app and sat in the silence of my small apartment, feeling the weight of their rejection settle over me like a heavy blanket. 2 weeks after the engagement party photos went viral in our family circle, Dad called. I saw his name on my screen and felt a foolish flicker of hope. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he'd had a change of heart about the wedding. Maybe he finally realized how wrong this all was. I was completely wrong. Adrian, he said, his voice all business, no warmth. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't apologize for the humiliation. He launched straight into his real purpose for calling. I need a favor. He spun some story about how one of Callum's wedding vendors needed an unexpected deposit and they were running short on cash. Could I loan them $3,000? Just until after the honeymoon, of course. They'd pay me back with interest. I knew they weren't actually short on money. Callum's wedding was costing more than most people's cars. This wasn't about finances. It was a power play, a test to see if I was still useful to them for something, even from hundreds of miles away. It was Dad's way of maintaining control, of making me complicit in my own exclusion. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I can't do that. The line went cold. The fake friendliness vanished completely. I see, he said, his tone sharp with resentment. Good to know where your loyalties lie, son. He hung up without another word, adding another layer of guilt to the pile he'd been building my entire life. The final manipulation came the week before the wedding. My aunt called, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. Adrian, dear, I simply had to reach out. Your mother is just sick with worry about you, she began, playing her part perfectly in their family drama. I stayed silent, letting her perform her rehearsed speech. Callum feels absolutely terrible about this whole situation, she continued, laying the guilt on thick. He was just worried you'd be uncomfortable at such a formal event. With everyone bringing their successful partners and talking about their careers, he was really trying to protect you, sweetheart, to save you from feeling embarrassed. The rage that spread through me was cold and calculating. They were rewriting the narrative again, twisting their cruel exclusion into an act of kindness. They weren't satisfied with just rejecting me. They needed me to believe it was for my own good, that I was the one who was broken and needed their protection. He knows how sensitive you can be, she pressed on. And he just didn't want you to feel out of place among all his successful friends and colleagues. That was the moment everything crystallized. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully pushed the family failure so far away that I couldn't cast a shadow on their perfect celebration. But they had made one catastrophic error in judgment. They had completely underestimated who I had become. They were so wrapped up in their own small world of status and appearances that they never bothered to ask real questions about my life. They heard security work and pictured me in an ill-fitting uniform, walking empty hallways at midnight. They never asked what I was securing or for whom. They had no idea that for the past 5 years, I hadn't been drifting aimlessly through life. I had been training. I had been pushing myself past every physical and mental limit I thought I had. While they debated wedding colors and seating arrangements, I was in advanced leadership courses. While they worried about their social standing, I was earning the trust and respect of my unit in the Royal Marines. They thought I didn't have decent clothes for a formal wedding. They had no clue that hanging in my closet was a dress uniform that had been earned through more sweat, blood, and sacrifice than they could comprehend. A uniform that commanded immediate respect from anyone who understood what it represented. The deep blue wool was perfectly pressed, every brass button polished to a mirror shine. The rows of ribbons on the chest told stories of service, courage, and brotherhood that my family would never understand. It wasn't just clothing. It was proof of who I had become without their approval or support. As I stood in front of my closet that week, running my fingers over the immaculate fabric, I knew they had given me the perfect opportunity to show them exactly who their family disappointment really was. I couldn't do this alone, though. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my commanding officer, Colonel Harrington. He was a fair but stern man who had seen me at my absolute lowest during training and had pushed me to discover my best. I sat in his office, feeling slightly foolish as I laid out my family situation to someone I respected so deeply. I told him everything. The phone call, the digital humiliation, the payoff check, the gaslighting. He listened without interruption, his weathered face unreadable. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence. I thought he might tell me to forget about it, to take the high road. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye with the intensity that had shaped me into the man I was today. Captain Adrian Vance of Her Majesty's Royal Marines is not someone any family should be ashamed of, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You have approved leave for this period. You go to that wedding and represent yourself and this uniform with the dignity you have earned. His words hit me like armor plating, stronger than any family approval I had ever craved. This man, who had seen me break and rebuild myself, was giving me permission to stand up for who I had become. I wasn't going to face my family's judgment alone, either. My closest friend on base, Lieutenant Ezra Cole, had listened to this family drama unfold over the past several months. He was a man of quiet strength and unshakable integrity, the kind of person you wanted beside you when everything went wrong. When I told him my plan for the wedding, he didn't hesitate for even a second. I'm going with you, he said simply. Let's give them the +1 they'll never forget. Ezra understood what this meant. He knew the significance of showing up in uniform, the statement it would make. More importantly, he knew I needed someone who understood my worth standing beside me when I faced my family's shallow judgment. The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Callum. Even after everything, he couldn't resist one final twist of the knife. Thinking of you tomorrow, bro. We'll make sure to send you lots of pictures so you feel like you were there. The casual cruelty of it, the complete obliviousness to what he had done, was almost breathtaking. He was so wrapped up in his own self-importance, so convinced of his superiority, that he couldn't imagine I might do anything other than exactly what I was told. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say with words. Tomorrow, my presence would say everything that needed to be said. 10. The wedding venue was exactly what I expected. Rolling green countryside, a massive stone manor house that probably cost more to rent for one day than most people made in a year. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway like expensive jewelry. Guests in designer clothes walked across manicured lawns, their pastel outfits perfect for the fairy tale setting Callum and his bride had created. Ezra and I pulled up to the valet stand in my black sedan. For a moment, we just sat in the quiet car, both understanding the significance of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about crashing a wedding or causing drama. This was about claiming the respect I had earned and showing my family the man they had refused to see. Ready, Captain? Ezra asked, his voice steady and sure. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my uniform, the significance of every ribbon and medal on my chest. Ready, Lieutenant. We stepped out of the car simultaneously, and the effect was immediate and electric. The light chatter among guests milling around the entrance died away like someone had turned down the volume on life. A ripple of silence spread outward as every head turned toward us. We were both in our full-dress blue uniforms, every detail perfect. The deep navy wool, the razor-sharp creases, the polished black shoes that reflected the afternoon sun. The rows of colorful ribbons and medals on our chests told stories of service and sacrifice that commanded instant, silent respect. We walked toward the entrance, our shoes clicking in perfect rhythm on the stone pathway. The only sound in the suddenly quiet courtyard was our measured footsteps. A frantic wedding planner with a clipboard and headset rushed over to intercept us, her face a mask of polite panic. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her hand like a traffic cop. "I'm terribly sorry, but I don't have either of you on the guest list." I met her gaze calmly, my voice clear and steady. "I'm Adrian Vance. I'm the groom's brother." Her eyes went wide with confusion, darting from my face to the uniform and back again. She clearly didn't know how to handle this situation, but it didn't matter because at that moment, Dad spotted me through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was standing in the elegant lobby, holding a crystal glass of champagne, laughing with one of his business partners. The glass froze halfway to his lips. The confident smile vanished from his face like someone had erased it. His jaw literally dropped open in shock. Across the marble lobby, Mom saw me next. She was adjusting flowers in a vase, playing the part of the perfect mother of the groom. When her eyes landed on me through the glass, She gasped so sharply that several guests turned to look at her. Her hand flew to her chest, as if she'd been physically struck. The wedding planner was still sputtering about guest lists when Callum himself appeared. He had been posing for photographs near the grand staircase, his face the perfect picture of groom day joy. As he turned his head and saw me standing in the entrance, that million-dollar smile collapsed like a house of cards. It twisted into a mask of pure shock and rage. His expensive tuxedo rustled as he marched across the marble floor toward me, his new bride trailing behind him in her flowing white dress, looking completely bewildered by the sudden tension. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "I told you not to come. You're ruining everything." His bride stood beside him, her perfect wedding makeup unable to hide her confusion as she looked back and forth between us. The entire lobby had gone silent, every guest frozen in place like actors who had forgotten their lines. Dad finally found his voice and hurried over, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "Adrian, this is completely inappropriate," he sputtered, trying to keep his voice low but failing miserably. "You can't just show up like this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I stood my ground and looked him straight in the eye, my voice clear and steady enough for everyone in the suddenly silent lobby to hear every single word. "You said I wasn't welcome because I didn't have a respectable outfit or a suitable companion," I stated, my words cutting through the air like a blade. "I believe I have solved both of those problems." I gestured to my uniform with quiet pride. "This is Captain Adrian Vance of Her Majesty's Royal Marines, and this is my escort, Lieutenant Ezra Cole." The air in the room shifted completely. The whispers stopped. The judgment in people's eyes transformed into curiosity, then recognition, then respect. You could feel the change ripple through the crowd like electricity. Then something incredible happened that I will never forget as long as I live. An elderly man standing near the back of the lobby, someone I recognized as one of Grandpa's old friends from his service days, slowly stood up a little straighter. He was a veteran, and his experienced eyes took in every detail of our uniforms with the understanding that only comes from shared service. He gave me a short, sharp, perfect salute that would have made my drill instructor proud. "Captain," he said, his voice thick with emotion and respect. "It's an absolute honor, sir." In that single powerful moment, the entire narrative flipped upside down. My family's petty, cruel judgment became completely meaningless. Callum's expensive, carefully orchestrated wedding became nothing more than background noise to a display of real, earned honor. The elderly veteran's salute broke whatever spell of shock had held the room. Suddenly, other guests began approaching us, their faces bright with genuine interest and respect. A distinguished woman in an elegant purple dress stepped forward. "Have you recently returned from deployment?" she asked warmly. Behind her, several other guests nodded with obvious admiration. "Yes, ma'am," I replied politely. 6 months in Afghanistan." The crowd around us grew larger. People wanted to shake our hands, to thank us for our service, to ask respectful questions about our experiences. The official wedding photographer, who had been capturing staged family photos moments earlier, began snapping pictures of us surrounded by genuinely smiling guests. Callum stood frozen in the middle of his own wedding lobby, watching his carefully planned spotlight shift completely away from him. His face was pale with shock and growing rage as more and more guests gravitated toward us, leaving him and his bride standing alone in their expensive finery. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "He's nobody, just a soldier in a costume, trying to steal attention from my wedding." The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Several guests turned to stare at him in shock. Ezra calmly reached into his jacket and produced his military identification, along with a photo of our unit in Afghanistan. The proof of our service was undeniable. "Actually," Ezra said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority that came from leading men in combat, "Captain Vance led a unit that saved 17 civilian lives during an insurgent attack last year. He was awarded the Military Cross for his actions." The crowd around us grew even larger, their faces filled with awe and respect. Someone started clapping, and soon the entire lobby was applauding. Not for Callum on his wedding day, but for the brother he had tried to erase. Even the bride's parents, wealthy socialites who had probably never spoken to a military person in their lives, pushed through the crowd to shake our hands. We had no idea Callum had a brother in the military, the father said, his voice full of genuine admiration. You must be so proud of your service. The bride's mother leaned in conspiratorially. Why wasn't he in any of the engagement photos? We would have loved to include a war hero in our family portraits. I watched Callum's face crumble as he realized what was happening. His own in-laws were questioning why he had hidden me away. The guests who should have been focused on him were instead clustered around the brother he had called a disappointment. The wedding photographer kept snapping pictures, and I could see in his professional eye that he knew these were the shots people would remember. Not the staged family portraits with fake smiles, but the genuine moment when a room full of strangers honored two soldiers who had served their country. Even the minister approached us, his face bright with respect. Captain, Lieutenant, would you be willing to say a few words during the ceremony? It would be an honor to have you participate. Callum exploded. Absolutely not, he shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls. This is my wedding, not some military parade. He's trying to ruin my day. The entire lobby fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. I wasn't shocked by my presence. I was shocked at the groom's behavior. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The bride looked mortified, her perfect wedding day glow replaced by embarrassment. Callum, she whispered urgently, tugging on his arm. People are staring. But he was beyond caring about appearances now. Months of planning the perfect wedding, years of being the golden child, all of it was crashing down because his dismissed brother had shown up in a uniform that commanded more respect than his trust fund ever could. He's nobody, Callum repeated, his voice getting louder and more desperate. Just a grunt who couldn't make it in the real world. The insult landed like a physical blow, not just to me, but to every veteran in the room. I saw faces harden, saw the elderly man who had saluted me take a step forward with narrowed eyes. But I didn't need anyone else to fight this battle for me. I had come here for exactly this moment, and I wasn't going to let my brother's meltdown rob me of it. I walked slowly across the marble floor until I was standing directly in front of Callum, close enough that only he could hear my words. You tried to erase me, I said quietly, my voice steady and calm. You wanted me gone because you thought I was an embarrassment to your perfect image. But today, you erased yourself. I stepped back and raised my voice so the entire room could hear. Congratulations on your wedding, Callum. I hope you and your bride have a wonderful life together. I turned to his wife, who was standing frozen in her white dress, and offered her a formal nod. Ma'am, I wish you all the happiness in the world. You deserve a celebration focused on love, not family drama. The grace and dignity in my words stood in stark contrast to Callum's outburst. Several guests nodded approvingly, while others looked at my brother with obvious disappointment. Ezra and I walked toward the exit with the same measured pace we had entered with. Behind us, the lobby was buzzing with whispered conversations. I could hear fragments of what people were saying. Can you believe how the groom treated his own brother? A war hero, and he tried to ban him from the wedding. Those uniforms were absolutely magnificent. The poor bride looked so embarrassed. As we reached the door, I turned back one last time. Callum stood in the middle of his wedding lobby, surrounded by guests who were no longer looking at him with admiration, but with confusion and disappointment. His perfect day had become a showcase for his own ugly character. We walked out into the cool afternoon air, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family. Peace. I wasn't angry or bitter or seeking more revenge. I had come to close a chapter, to show myself that I never needed their approval to be worthy of respect. The elderly veteran followed us outside. Captain, he called out, and we turned back to face him. I served in the Falklands 40 years ago. I want you to know that what you did there took more courage than anything I saw in combat. He shook both our hands firmly. Your family doesn't deserve you, son, but your country is damn lucky to have you. As Ezra and I drove away from the manor house, I looked back one last time at the fairy tale setting of Callum's perfect wedding. Through the windows, I could see guests still clustered in groups, still talking animatedly. But they weren't talking about the bride's dress or the flower arrangements or the expensive champagne. They were talking about the groom who had tried to ban his war hero brother from his own wedding. By the time we reached the main road, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. Word was spreading fast through social media. and it wasn't spreading the way Callum had planned. The first message was from my cousin Emma, who had witnessed the family video call months earlier. "Adrian, I can't believe what just happened. The whole family is talking about it. You looked absolutely incredible in uniform. I'm so sorry we never knew about your service." More messages poured in from extended family members, family friends, even some of Callum's college buddies who had been at the wedding. But it wasn't just private messages. Photos from the wedding were already appearing on social media, and they weren't the pictures Callum had planned. The most shared image was of me and Ezra surrounded by smiling guests, our uniforms crisp and proud in the afternoon light. Another showed the elderly veteran saluting us, his face full of emotion and respect. A third captured the moment when the bride's parents shook our hands, their faces bright with admiration. But the photo that really went viral was one I didn't even know had been taken. It showed Callum in the background of one of our group shots, his face twisted with rage and jealousy while guests ignored him completely to focus on us. The contrast was devastating. The comments on these photos told the real story of what had happened at that wedding, and it wasn't the story Callum wanted the world to remember. Imagine banning your own brother because he's a war hero and you're jealous. The groom looks absolutely pathetic in that background shot. Those uniforms are incredible. What an honor to serve. The family should be ashamed of how they treated him. By evening, the story had spread beyond just wedding photos. Someone had recorded Callum's outburst on their phone, and the video was making rounds on social media. You could hear him clearly calling me nobody and just a grunt, while the camera showed me standing in my decorated uniform surrounded by respectful guests. The comments on that video were brutal. The groom is having a meltdown because his brother is more of a man than he'll ever be. Calling a decorated soldier nobody at your own wedding. Stay classy. That bride looked like she wanted to disappear. Poor woman. The brother handled it with such class while the groom acted like a spoiled child. Local news stations picked up the story by the next morning. Groom bans war hero brother from wedding became a headline that followed Callum's perfect new life into his honeymoon and beyond. The story had everything news producers loved: family drama, military honor, social media evidence, and a clear villain. I didn't participate in any interviews or add fuel to the fire. I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself in every photo, every video, every witness account from that day. Callum and his bride returned from their Italian honeymoon to find that their wedding was famous, but not in the way they had hoped. Instead of being remembered for elegant flowers and expensive champagne, it would forever be known as the wedding where a jealous groom tried to erase his war hero brother. 3 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from Mom. Her voice was different from the last time we had spoken, smaller somehow, less certain of her position. "Adrian," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what happened at the wedding. Some of the things people have been saying online. I think maybe we made some mistakes." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from her, but it felt hollow. Too little, too late, motivated more by public embarrassment than genuine remorse. "I had no idea about your military service," she continued. "About what you accomplished. Why didn't you ever tell us?" The question hung in the air between us. Why hadn't I told them? Because every time I tried to share anything about my life, they changed the subject back to Callum's latest promotion or achievement. Because they had made it clear that nothing I did would ever measure up to their golden child. "You never asked, Mom," I said quietly. "In 5 years, you never once asked what I was actually doing with my life." The silence stretched for a long time. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Could we try to start over? Maybe have dinner sometime?" I thought about it for a moment, weighing the years of dismissal against the possibility of reconciliation. "I'll think about it," I said, and I meant it. But I also meant something else. That any relationship we rebuilt would be on my terms, between equals, not between the successful son and the family disappointment they had created in their minds. Dad never called. He never apologized or acknowledged what had happened. According to family gossip, he was furious that the wedding had become a circus and blamed me entirely for the fallout. Some people never change, and some bridges burn so completely that they can't be rebuilt. Callum and I haven't spoken since the wedding. I heard through family channels that his marriage was struggling, that the viral embarrassment of their wedding day had cast a shadow over their relationship that they couldn't escape. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this. I had never wanted to ruin his life, just to reclaim my own dignity. But the most important call came from Colonel Harrington a month after the wedding. "Captain," he said, his voice warm with pride, "I've been hearing some interesting stories about your leave time." I cringed, wondering if the media attention had caused problems for the unit. "Sir, I hope I didn't reflect poorly on the Marines." "Quite the opposite," he replied. "The recruitment office has been flooded with inquiries since that story went public. Young people say they want to serve with the kind of honor and dignity you displayed. You've reminded the public what military service really means." He paused for a moment before continuing. "There's talk of using your story in recruitment materials if you're interested. This is what a Royal Marine looks like." The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had hidden me away because I was an embarrassment now had a son whose military service was being held up as an example for the nation. A year later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Not from family this time, but from Emma, my cousin who had witnessed that terrible video call. The invitation was addressed to Captain Adrian Vance and guest, and included a handwritten note. "Adrian, I would be honored to have a war hero at my wedding. Please come in whatever uniform makes you feel most proud. I want my future husband to meet the cousin I'm most proud of." I smiled as I read it, feeling the warmth of genuine family acceptance for the first time in years. This was what family should be. People who celebrated your achievements instead of hiding them, who built you up instead of tearing you down. Ezra agreed to be my +1 again, though this time we were the guests of honor rather than uninvited crashers. Emma's wedding was everything Callum's had pretended to be, full of joy, love, and genuine celebration. When she introduced me to her new husband as my cousin, the war hero, I felt none of the embarrassment my parents had always projected onto me. I felt pride. The elderly veteran from Callum's wedding was there too, a distant relative I had never known we shared. He pulled me aside during the reception. "I've been following your story, Captain," he said. "What you did that day at your brother's wedding, showing them who you really are instead of who they thought you were. That's the kind of courage that can't be taught." Looking back now, I realized that the wedding wasn't really about revenge or proving a point to my family. It was about proving something to myself. For 30 years, I had let their opinion of me shape how I saw myself. I had internalized their disappointment and made it my own. But standing in that lobby in my dress uniform, surrounded by strangers who immediately recognized my worth, I finally understood something crucial. Their inability to see my value said nothing about me and everything about them. The military had taught me discipline, honor, and brotherhood. It had shown me what real respect looked like. Not the hollow social climbing my family valued, but the deep recognition that comes from shared sacrifice and genuine achievement. My uniform wasn't just cloth and brass buttons. It was proof that I had found my place in the world, that I belonged somewhere even if it wasn't at my family's table. The viral wedding story changed my life in ways I never expected. I received letters from other military families dealing with similar rejection, from young people inspired to serve, from veterans who felt seen and valued in a way they hadn't experienced since leaving service. More importantly, it freed me from the need for my family's approval. I had spent decades chasing recognition from people who were determined not to give it. Now I was surrounded by a brotherhood that valued courage over comfort, service over status. Today, I'm still Captain Adrian Vance of the Royal Marines. I'm still the same person who walked into that wedding in dress uniform. But I'm no longer carrying the weight of my family's disappointment. That burden belongs to them now, not to me. I've learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the least capable of seeing who you really are. They get so invested in the story they've written about you that they can't recognize the person you've actually become. But I've also learned that there are people in this world who will see your worth immediately, who will salute your achievements, who will stand beside you when your own family won't. These are the people who become your real family, bound not by blood but by respect and shared values. The wedding that was supposed to be my final exclusion became my liberation. The day they tried to erase me from their perfect picture became the day I finally stepped into my own. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, if you've ever been told you're not good enough or that you don't fit their image of success, remember this. Their limitations are not your reality. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you that you don't need their approval to be worthy of respect. Sometimes being rejected by the wrong people leads you to the right ones. The brother who tried to ban me from his wedding actually gave me the greatest gift of all. He forced me to stand up for myself, to claim the respect I had earned, and to stop waiting for validation from people who were never going to give it. I walked into that wedding as the family disappointment and walked out as a man who knew his own worth. The uniform didn't make me worthy of respect. I had earned that through my service and sacrifice. But it sure helped everyone else see what my family had been too blind to recognize. That's a trade I'd make again in a heartbeat. Their approval was never worth having anyway.